Have you ever felt the need to share something and then, when you did, you wished you hadn't? Not because it wasn't true, but because once it left your mouth, something shifted. Something fragile was exposed. Something powerful. Diluted. You don't feel stronger. You feel scattered. You feel seen but not understood. Because sharing too soon doesn't always bring connection. Sometimes it invites confusion, judgment, noise. And that noise disrupts your center. The Stoics understood this long before the world became loud. They lived in silence, not to disappear but to listen deeper, to build something that didn't require permission to exist. You're allowed to do the same. You're allowed to grow in silence, to change without broadcasting every stage, to protect your peace without calling it isolation. Because not every part of you needs to be known to be real. In fact, the more people know about you, the more they believe they have a right to your story, to your wounds, to your mind. But they don't. Your silence is not emptiness. It's presence. It's choice. And choice is where your power begins. You've said enough. You've explained enough. You've over-justified, over-clarified, over-performed. And where did it leave you? Exhausted, misunderstood, stretched thin. Because the more you chase being understood, the less you understand yourself. And that's the cost of overexposure. When everything is shared, nothing feels sacred. So maybe this is the moment to reclaim the pieces of you you've been giving away. Not to hide, but to rebuild, inwardly, honestly, quietly. Because transformation does not require an audience. Healing doesn't need applause. Discipline doesn't need updates. Wisdom doesn't need to speak before it's ready. So hold it. Hold your fire. Hold your fear. Hold your progress. Let it deepen. Let it settle. Let it shape you in the silence where no one interrupts and no one narrates what they cannot feel. This isn't suppression. It's discernment. It's knowing that your energy is too valuable to be scattered by people who haven't earned it. You don't owe your truth to every listener. You don't need to prove your pain to be valid. You need space to think, to feel, to process before you perform. Because once you speak something out loud, it's no longer just yours. It becomes opinion, interpretation, noise. So guard your voice, not with fear, with reverence. Because your silence can hold more wisdom than your words ever could. And when you do speak, let it come from peace, not pressure. Let it carry weight, not noise. Let it invite presence, not performance. Your life doesn't need narration. It needs embodiment. So the next time you feel the urge to tell the world something, pause. Ask yourself, does this need to be shared or simply lived? Does this need to be declared or deepened? Because the answers you're seeking often arrive not through explanation, but through stillness. You've begun to feel the weight of your own voice, not because it's weak, but because it's powerful. And you're learning now. Not everything powerful needs to be spoken. You don't need to announce every plan. You don't need to share every thought. You don't need to explain every silence. There's strength in restraint, in choosing what stays inside, in letting your actions become your voice, and your silence become your clarity. You've watched what happens when you share. Too early. The vision fades. The momentum weakens. The noise creeps in, and you wonder, was it ever real? It was. But you handed it to the wind before its roots were ready, and now you know better. Now you sit with it longer. Now you let it grow quietly. Now you protect what matters not with hiding, but with intention, because sacred things need space. They don't need exposure. They need depth. They need patience. They need solitude. That solitude is not punishment. It's preparation. It's where your clarity is formed. It's where your boundaries are sharpened. It's where your mind learns to stop begging to be seen and start learning how to see. You begin to notice what silence reveals. Who listens, who doesn't, who respects, who only responds. You start seeing the difference between those who understand your quiet and those who panic in the absence of noise. And you You stop filling the space just to make others comfortable. You allow discomfort. You allow pause. You allow stillness to rise until it teaches you something words never could. This is the practice now. Not just thinking before speaking, but feeling before revealing. Not just protecting your story, but honoring its timing. Because timing matters. There are things inside you not ready to be shared. Not because they're false, but because they're fragile. You're still forming, still aligning, still discovering who you are when no one is watching and nothing is performing. That discovery is not for everyone. Let them wonder, let them guess, let them talk. You, stay still, stay clear, stay focused, because what you're building is not for applause, it's for strength, and strength doesn't broadcast, it builds brick by brick, habit by habit, decision by decision. You don't need updates. You need consistency. You don't need agreement. You need integrity. You've chosen a path now that many will not understand, and that's not your burden to carry. Your burden is to stay aligned when everything around you asks you to perform, but you've done that before, and you've felt how it empties you, how it burns fast and fades even faster. Not this time. This time, you go slow, you go quiet, you go deep. Not because you're unsure, because you're unshakable. And unshakable men don't shout. They walk. They move with calm. They speak with weight. They protect what's real. And right now, what's real is your need to move inward, to clear the noise, to stop reporting every step, to stop sharing what no longer needs to be seen. Because the man who learns to live without being seen becomes the man who cannot be moved. You've started noticing the value of what you don't say, how silence shapes perception, how withholding creates presence, how restraint builds gravity. You speak less now, but what you say lands. Not because it's louder, but because it's earned, because it's deliberate, because it's no longer filtered through the need to be accepted. You've let go of that. The performance, the oversharing, the chase. You're no longer spilling truth to be understood. You're sitting with it to be grounded. Because grounded men don't rush to be known. They build something worth knowing. And when they're ready, they reveal with precision. Not everything. Just enough. Because now you see, too much exposure weakens meaning. Even truth, when spoken without intention, becomes noise. So you train yourself to speak from a deeper place. Not from impulse, not from insecurity, from alignment. You say only what strengthens the frame. You speak only what preserves the peace. You keep the rest within. Not as secrets, as sacred. And in that sacred silence, you begin to reclaim yourself. Piece by piece, layer by layer. You take back the parts of you that were given too easily. You hold them. You honor them. You protect them. Because not everyone deserves access. Not everyone earns clarity. Not everyone can carry your truth without trying to shape it. So you stop offering it freely. You stop trying to convince. You stop needing to explain your evolution to people still committed to misunderstanding. You stop giving them the map to places they've never tried to reach. You stop dragging them to the door that you were always meant to open alone. And in that solitude, you grow. You grow in discernment. You grow in patience. You grow in quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't apologize. The kind of quiet that commands a room without ever raising its voice. You begin to feel the weight of your own presence, and you begin to see you don't need to share the entire journey to walk it fully. You don't need to post the process to own the progress. You don't need to explain your piece to people still addicted to noise. You've traded attention for awareness, exposure for embodiment, performance for practice. And the practice now is to live, without leaking, to move, without narrating, to grow, without begging for validation. Because you've seen where it leads, the endless sharing, the need to be seen, the craving to be liked. It leaves you empty, scattered, exhausted. But this new rhythm, this silence you've chosen, it fills you. It refines you. It sharpens what matters. You're no longer diluted by opinion. You're no longer defined by reaction. You're no longer swayed by misunderstanding. You stand, not on visibility, on values. You move, not to please, to align, and that alignment, that sacred quiet space within, is now your compass. You begin to feel the difference between being known and being real. You don't need to be known by many to be known by yourself. And that knowing, it doesn't require noise. It requires presence. You walk into rooms differently now, not to be seen, but to observe, not to impress, but to understand, not to perform, but to hold the energy you've been building in silence. You've stopped trying to be understood by those who never took the time to understand themselves. You don't offer explanations to people who only listen to respond. You've learned. The more you explain, the less you're heard. The more you defend, the more you're questioned. So you hold. You pause. You choose when to speak and when to let silence answer for you. That silence has become your mirror. It shows you what's real, what's strong, what no longer needs reinforcement from outside opinion. You've broken the habit of turning your life into a monologue. You no longer narrate every move hoping someone will validate your direction. You validate it yourself, by walking it, by living it, by becoming the man who no longer needs external applause to feel aligned. You've traded performance for privacy, not because you fear judgment, but because you finally respect the weight of your own presence. You speak less because you've realized your words carry power, and power, once understood, must be protected. You don't speak for reaction. You speak for precision, and sometimes you don't speak at all. Because now you've built a life where your absence says more than your presence used to. Where your boundaries don't need to be explained. They're lived. You no longer invite confusion by giving too much. You've learned to let people reveal themselves in your silence. And they do. They show you who needs your energy and who needs your distance. They show you who respects your quiet and who is only comfortable with chaos. You no longer force clarity into places where it won't be received. You bring light, but you don't drag it. You offer truth, but you don't impose it. You don't fight for space. You create it. You protect it, and you live from it. That's where your power is now. In space, in breath, in stillness, and from that stillness comes vision. A vision not for others to approve, but for you to embody. And embodiment is not loud, it's lived. It shows up in how you move through resistance, in how you respond to challenge, in how you stay still when the world tries to provoke you into performance. You've stopped biting the bait. You've stopped proving your worth. You've stopped reacting to every voice that doesn't carry your values, because you're not available to be drained anymore. You've found something better than attention. You found alignment. And in alignment, you no longer question if you're enough, because you've lived it, quietly, daily, without the need for validation. You no longer share everything just because it's true, because now you've realized truth without timing becomes noise, and noise drowns meaning. You let your words ripen now. You let your thoughts sit. You give your emotions space to teach you something before you speak them into the world. You've learned. There's a difference between honesty and wisdom. Honesty says everything. Wisdom says just enough. So you say less. Not out of fear. Out of respect. For yourself. For the path. For the process that's still unfolding within you. You no longer narrate your healing. You live it. You no longer report your every goal. You work in silence and let the results speak. Not because you're hiding, but because you've found something sacred in privacy. You've started treating your journey like a temple, not a theater. You don't invite everyone in. You don't leave the doors open for every opinion to walk through because you know now. Most people don't see you. They see their version of you, their projections, their filters, their noise. So you stop trying to correct it. You let them think what they want, and you stay still. Because the moment you stop needing to be understood, you start living as someone who's finally free. free from the weight of explaining, free from the need to be validated, free from the addiction of being seen at every step. You've become quiet on purpose. You don't chase conversation. You don't overshare your plans. You don't decorate your life for the comfort of others. You simplify. You sharpen. You sit in silence and listen to the parts of yourself you used to drown out with attention. And those parts, Tori, they've grown. They've spoken. They've rebuilt your center. So now when you speak, it's from there, from center, from stillness, from something so deeply rooted it doesn't shake when others question it. You don't flinch anymore. You don't scramble to be accepted. You don't twist your truth to be palatable. You let your truth stand. You let your silence hold it. And when the moment calls, you speak, not to fill the space, but to anchor it. Because you've learned that real communication doesn't start in the mouth. It starts in presence, and presence is built in silence. You've stopped announcing your intentions. You've stopped narrating your self-discipline. You've stopped measuring your worth by how much you reveal. Because now, your strength is not in how much you share. It's in how deeply you live without needing anyone to witness. That kind of strength, it doesn't look like power. It feels like peace. You don't need to prove anymore. You've arrived. Not at perfection, at presence. And presence needs no applause. It just needs practice. And you have been practicing. Silently. Relentlessly. Truthfully. And that truth no longer needs to be explained, it just needs to be lived. You start realizing that not everything unspoken is repressed. Some things are protected. Some truths are too sacred to be thrown into careless ears. Some goals are too fragile to be announced before they've taken root. You used to share out of excitement, out of fear, out of a hunger to feel connected. Now you share only when it serves the mission, not the ego. You've begun to live like a vault, not closed, contained, still, not out of fear, out of strength. Because now you don't need the world to echo your clarity. You walk with it, inside, every step grounded, every decision measured. You no longer open your life to every opinion that knocks. You've replaced exposure with refinement. You're not hiding. You're focusing. And focus means this. You don't scatter your energy. You gather it. You don't dilute your message trying to please everyone. You speak less, but every word holds weight. You've stopped bleeding your story into spaces that weren't meant to hold it. You've stopped sharing your struggles as a form of connection. You've stopped letting the wrong people write chapters in your book. Now you protect the pages. You protect the pen. You protect the narrative because it's no longer built on reaction. It's built on reason. And that reason is born in solitude. In the quiet hours where no one claps. Where no one validates. Where no one is watching but you. You don't perform in that space. You practice. You sharpen. You unlearn. You return. And each time you return, you remember. Not everything sacred needs to be seen. Not everything real needs to be revealed. So you protect your routines. You protect your decisions. You protect your inner world like a fortress. Because when the world is loud, it's easy to leak. It's easy to share for relief instead of for truth. It's easy to narrate your discipline instead of embody it. But now you embody. You let the process speak through your presence, through the calm in your tone, through the posture you hold when pressure rises. You don't explain who you are becoming. You let people feel it or not. You don't adjust your energy to be understood. You adjust your circle to protect your peace. And that peace, you earned it. Not by shouting, by showing up, over and over. When no one saw, when no one asked, when no one clapped. Because that's where the real identity forms. Not in declaration, in discipline. So you stop rehearsing your past. You stop performing your future. You stop narrating your now. You just live it, quietly, firmly, with clarity. And that clarity moves differently. It doesn't seek. It attracts. It doesn't explain. It reflects. It doesn't apologize. It aligns. You walk through life now as someone who no longer needs to be loud to be certain, who no longer needs to be seen to be solid, who no longer needs to be approved to be free. You've stopped sharing not because you're cold, but because you're warm enough inside to no longer need external heat. You no longer speak to be seen. You speak when it strengthens your silence. Because now you know, the most dangerous kind of power is the kind that doesn't announce itself. You walk into the room and carry your story with you, but you don't tell it. You let the energy speak. You let the calm explain. You let the presence do all the talking. People feel it, even if they can't name it. They feel the weight of someone who no longer needs to convince. They feel the difference between noise and clarity. And you don't flinch in the silence anymore. You've made peace with it. You've turned it from discomfort into discipline, because silence has taught you more than any audience ever could. It's taught you where your fears live, where your old stories still whisper, where your identity needed refinement. It's in that silence you discovered that not everyone needs access, that not everyone can hold your truth without trying to reshape it. So now you hold it yourself. You sit with it. You let it deepen. And when it's ready, you let it walk beside you, quietly, without explanation. You've learned that most people listen to respond, not to understand. So you stopped sharing in search of understanding, and started understanding yourself in the absence of sharing. That shift, it changes everything. You no longer chase support. You become it, for yourself, through action, through alignment, through choosing the hard thing when the easy thing is calling. You've stopped announcing your grind. You've stopped explaining your discipline, because you've seen what happens when you talk more than you do. The edge softens. The momentum fades. The fire flickers. Now you protect the fire. You tend to it. You sit with it. You let it burn quietly until the results become undeniable. And when they do, you still don't say much. Because you didn't build for applause. You built for integrity. That integrity now lives in every choice. In the way you say no without guilt. In the way you leave rooms that don't reflect your values. In the way you speak only when your silence has nothing left to teach. You don't speak for connection. You connect through presence. You don't open up just to feel close. You stay grounded to feel whole, because closeness without safety is chaos. And you're done building relationships that demand your story before they've earned your trust. You don't bleed on the timeline. You don't confess to strangers. You don't process in public. You heal in private. You grow in quiet. You thrive in spaces that don't require performance, and in that quiet you remember. What's not spoken is not lost. It's alive. It's waiting. It's becoming. Just like you move differently now. Not because you've changed for the world, but because you've returned to yourself. The self you silenced for too long. Beneath layers of performance. Beneath the pressure to share. You don't rush to reveal anymore. You pause. You wait. You ask, does this need to be said? Or is it stronger kept within? And more often now you choose to keep it. Not out of fear, out of wisdom, because you've watched what happens when sacred things are exposed too soon. They become entertainment. They become misunderstood. They become noise. But held in silence, they become strength. Your progress doesn't need an audience. Your growth doesn't need applause. Your healing doesn't need a caption, it just needs time. And space. And discipline. So you give it those things. You give it rhythm. You give it breath. You give it your full attention without seeking validation. And, slowly it builds. The habit sharpens. The vision aligns. The voice inside you grows calm. Because it no longer competes with the opinions of the world. It no longer seeks to be heard over the noise, it just speaks. And you listen. You've become a man who listens to himself again. Not to his fear, not to his doubt. To the part that moves without explanation. The part that knows when to speak, and when to build in silence. That's the part you honor now. So when others ask, what are you working on? Where have you been? What's next? You smile. You nod. You say little, not because there's nothing to say, but because what matters most isn't ready to be shared. It's still in the soil, still rooting, still becoming, and you protect that process like it's sacred, because it is. You've stopped offering access just because someone is curious. You don't confuse interest with intention anymore. You don't confuse proximity with safety. You don't confuse connection with alignment. You wait. You observe. You protect. Because your peace is not a performance. It's a practice. And the more you practice, the less you need the world to witness. You know what you're doing. You know what you're building. You know who you are becoming, and that knowing, it's quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't seek, it simply is. You walk into rooms now carrying everything you used to announce, but you don't say a word, because the energy speaks first. Because the stillness arrives before you do. Because your discipline walks ahead of your voice, and those who feel it will understand, and those who don't were never meant to. You've stopped giving the world your drafts. You no longer offer your becoming as something to be commented on, because now you understand. Creation needs silence, depth needs solitude, and peace needs privacy. You don't update the world every time you shift. You don't explain your boundaries before enforcing them. You don't outline your plans before they're lived, because wisdom taught you. What you say too soon can be taken from you, diluted, misinterpreted, stolen. But what you keep grows strong in the dark, unshaken, unspoiled, so you hold it, you carry it, you let it mature. You no longer open the door every time someone knocks, not because you're hiding, because not every knock deserves your attention. You've learned to discern. You've learned to protect your center. You've learned the cost of being constantly available. And now, you choose yourself over explanation. You choose your clarity over being understood. You choose your direction over their comfort. Because you finally learned. Not everyone gets to walk with you. Not everyone is meant to see you unfold. And those who are, won't need you to perform. They'll sit with your silence, they'll feel your presence, they'll meet you in the quiet. That quiet is your new home. It's where you think clearly. It's where you move deliberately. It's where you decide who you are without needing a second voice to confirm it. You don't chase resonance, you live in integrity. And what aligns will find you. What doesn't will fall away without you needing to push. You've stopped fighting to be seen. You've stopped defending your process. You've stopped feeding energy into conversations that never deserved your depth. You know now, your depth is a gift. And gifts are not thrown. They are placed, with care, with precision, with discernment. So, you place it only where it's safe, only where it grows, only where it's met with respect, not curiosity disguised as connection. Because you're not here to entertain. You're here to evolve. Quietly. Radically. Completely. You don't wear your growth like a badge. You walk with it, you embody it. You let your movement reflect the man you've become. And if they ask, you don't need to explain. If they listen, you don't need to convince. If they understand, you nod. If they don't, you keep walking. Because your path is not up for discussion. It's already been chosen. And the man walking it has no time to narrate. You don't need the world to clap anymore. Because you've stopped performing, you've started building, and builders don't yell, they focus. You walk differently now, not because the road changed, but because you've outgrown the need to be carried by reaction. You walk because that's what men do when they've stopped chasing attention and started choosing alignment. You've learned to take your time, to sharpen in silence, to let time reveal what words cannot. You don't need to announce your evolution. You let the work show it. You let the posture reveal it. You let the discipline reflect it. Because your life is not a story to be consumed. It's a standard to be lived. And standards are not explained. They're practiced. Every day you keep choosing peace over performance, depth over decoration, truth over applause. You don't measure progress in reactions. You measure it in consistency. You measure it in how little you need the noise. And the quieter you get, the more you hear. Yourself. Your path. Your strength. You hear what matters. And you stop repeating what doesn't. You've stopped trying to convert the doubtful. You've stopped trying to rescue the lost. You've stopped trying to explain the fire to those afraid of the heat. Now, you just burn. And whoever's meant to warm by it, they'll find you. You don't chase anymore, because what's for you can only recognize you when you're fully yourself, and you've become that. Not all at once, but through subtraction, through stillness, through the discipline of not giving everything away just because someone asked. You've stopped being available to energy that doesn't match yours. You've stopped sharing momentum with people who stall your movement. You've stopped letting proximity create permission because silence has shown you what noise never could. That most people aren't looking to understand. They're looking to pull, to drain, to soften your edges so they don't have to face their own. But you don't soften anymore. You refine. You don't shrink. You simplify. You don't bend. You align. And that alignment has become everything. It's how you wake up. It's how you train. It's how you speak. It's how you leave places that once held you, but no longer. Hold your growth. You don't hate them, you don't fight them, you just rise, and you rise without narration. Because what's rising in you can't be put into words yet. It's still forming, still anchoring, still building something so unshakable that the old you would barely recognize it. But the new you, he knows. He nods. He smiles. He returns to the work. Not because he needs results, but because he respects the rhythm. You've stopped trying to be understood in real time. You've stopped explaining growth as it happens because you finally see some chapters aren't meant to be read aloud. They're meant to be lived, to be wrestled with, to be quietly mastered before they're ever spoken. You've given up the need to make your process pretty. You no longer need to be inspiring while you're still healing. You don't owe clarity while you're still learning. And that realization has set you free. Free to grow in the dark. Free to change without commentary. Free to fall apart without turning it into content. You're not here to narrate your evolution. You're here to live it. And living it requires silence. Silence to hear what's next. Silence to feel what's true. Silence to confront what you'd rather hide. Because what's real doesn't shout. It settles. It reveals itself slowly in how you show up after the noise has died down, so you let it. You let your silence speak. You let your energy enter before your words. You let your peace become the loudest thing in the room. You're no longer pulled by the demand to update. You don't owe your transformation to timelines, to platforms, to people who haven't earned the right to witness your inner world. You don't say much anymore, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned. The most important things are often better felt than said. You carry them instead. You carry your discipline, your calm, your truth, and you carry them with so much integrity that people notice without you having to point. They feel it in how you move, in how you listen, in how you walk away without fear, without apology. Because now, you no longer abandon yourself just to stay understood. You no longer betray your boundaries to keep the peace. You are the peace, and you protect it with silence, with structure, with self-respect. You've become someone who doesn't need to be followed to lead. You lead yourself into deeper waters, into higher standards, into calmer truths. And that leadership, it starts in the quiet, in the early mornings, in the choices no one sees, in the conversations you stop having because your presence already answers the questions. You're not fighting to be heard. You're listening more now, to the breath, to the body, to the inner compass that always knew but needed you to get quiet enough to follow. You don't speak because you're afraid. You speak because you're ready. And readiness doesn't rush. It arrives. It arrives when the roots are deep enough, when the lessons are lived enough. When the man is solid enough to speak without seeking, you've become that man. And even if you haven't said it yet, you've shown it. You've stopped viewing your silence as absence. You've started treating it as power. Because now you know, what's kept private can grow in peace. And peace is where real strength is born. You no longer rush to be witnessed. You allow yourself to evolve without the pressure of being perceived. You don't offer every update like proof that you're doing the work. You let the work shape you so deeply that when you return, you don't need to explain. You are different, and it shows. You've become comfortable not being understood, because what you're becoming is not for everyone to interpret. It's for you to live. It's for you to embody in the way you speak less but carry more. In the way you no longer chase influence but hold inner order. You've shifted from saying I'm working on myself to simply working. No slogans, no declarations, no dramatic edits, just the steady, quiet practice of being who you said you would be when no one is watching. You've stopped needing people to agree with your evolution, because you know, agreement doesn't build self-respect. Integrity does. And integrity, that's your new home. That's where you return when distraction calls, when old patterns whisper, when the world offers you attention in exchange for your authenticity. You don't trade anymore. You don't bend. You don't explain. You simply align. Again and again, until alignment becomes your resting state. You protect your inner world now like it's sacred, because it is. It's where your wisdom is forged, where your decisions are born, where your peace is kept clean from the noise of overexposure. You don't invite everyone in. You don't speak just to speak. You don't let curiosity disrupt your clarity. And when they ask, you don't rush to fill the silence, you sit in it. You let them feel that you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be exact. Exact in your words. Exact in your choices. Exact in how you use your energy. You've made energy sacred now. You don't scatter it for validation. You don't waste it in explanation. You conserve it for what truly builds. Your work, your health, your discipline, your soul. And the man who conserves energy creates more power than the one who performs endlessly. You've stopped performing. You've started embodying. And that embodiment, it's rare. Because it's quiet. Because it doesn't advertise. Because it doesn't need to. It simply exists. It speaks through presence, through peace, through standards held silently. You no longer need to convince the world that you've changed. The world will feel it when it can no longer access you the way it used to, because you've built gates. Not out of spite, out of strength, out of respect for the journey you've chosen to walk, alone when necessary, quietly by design, unshaken by noise. You don't live out loud anymore. You live on purpose. You don't tell them what you're building. You become it. And when it's time to speak, you'll speak not to be heard, but to bring truth into the room without needing anything in return. Because now, you've become the man who says only what matters, who shares only what strengthens, and who holds the rest with silent power. That is Stoic philosophy, not in word, in life.